one is traveling to Masjid al-Aqsa, it's okay, there's no problem with that. As long as one is in the physical realm, there's no problem in seeing things in the physical realm. But then Allah Tabawi says, but can you explain, what do you mean by seeing the prophets in the physical realm? Here it gets a bit sensitive now, the discussion. What do you mean? Because the tradition says all the prophets prayed behind the Holy Messenger. Where? In Baytul Maqdis, Masjid al-Aqsa, somewhere in Palestine. Now, does history show of such an event? Well, it doesn't, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. But the point is, what do you mean by seeing the prophets? Because the prophets have passed away. Prophet Ibrahim, he gives the example of Prophet Ibrahim, has passed away. So what do you mean by seeing the physical Prophet Ibrahim? Now here he wants to allude to the fact that if they're going to come to the physical realm again, it's going to be a case of reincarnation. And that's not acceptable in Islam, and I want to discuss reincarnation a bit tonight. We have to be very careful in our aqa'id. If you believe in a ma'ad, because of Allah's justice there has to be a ma'ad, you have to make sure you don't fall into the trap of reincarnation. If you believe in the concept of alam al-dhar, that we were once upon a time before the physical creation, alam al-dhar is a reality, ma'ad is a reality. But how you explain it, if you don't be careful, you may, without knowing, be a believer in reincarnation. See, these things are, one's aqa'id, one has to understand them. There's no taqleed in aqa'id. One has to understand one's aqa'id, everyone to their own capacity. Or for example, Amirul Mu'mineen, in one tradition, Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he appeared before 40 people at the same time. If you believe they were 40 physical Amirul Mu'mineens, well, that's wrong. It's impossible. How can you have 40 physical people and they're all one person? They all have bodies and spirits of their own. See, Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, Ayatollah Hassan Zada Amuli, they say those 40 who saw Amirul Mu'mineen, they did see Amirul Mu'mineen, but not the physical Amirul Mu'mineen. It was a tamathul. It was a vision of Amirul Mu'mineen they saw. In the same way that Lady Maryam saw the vision of Archangel Gabriel, Amirul Mu'mineen is higher than Archangel Gabriel. He can appear in the barzakhi realms of me and you. An-nazaru ila wajhi Ali ibadatun. Seeing the face of Ali is ibadah. Well, all those munafiqs saw him. Was that ibadah? There's no physical Amirul Mu'mineen anymore. Does it mean that tradition has become extinct? No. We too have the capacity to see Amirul Mu'mineen. But the barzakhi tamathul, a vision of Amirul Mu'mineen. And that's of value to us. If you understand that carefully, you can understand how one benefits from seeing the 12th Imam today, rather than waiting for a physical coming, which may happen in 100,000 years' time. So this reincarnation, we have to be careful. Now, why is reincarnation problematic in Islam? Because imagine Prophet Ibrahim has passed away. The spirit is still there. The spirit of Ibrahim still exists. Now he wants to come back into this realm. First of all, earth can be converted to a human being like Adam alayhi salam. There's no problem there rationally. Under the normal cause and effects of nature that happens, earth can, over many years, over many thousands of cause and effects, eventually become a human being. Like the stick of Musa alayhi salam, which became a snake. So for example, the stick, over thousands of years, it may first become part of the earth, then it becomes a plant. A snake comes and consumes the plant, contributes to its sex cells, it procreates, and another snake comes eventually. See, it's possible, but it takes a long time. With miracles, Allah, the same causes and effects have to be preserved. You can't miss a step. The same cause and effects, they still have to be observed. The only thing with miracles, it all occurs instantaneously. But no step is missed, because if you miss a step, it's impossible for the realization to occur. So earth also can be converted to a human being, and earth being converted to a human being, eventually one of the causes in this procedure, in this process, is that of ensoulment. Where at 4 months, where the fetus is evolving, it gives rise to the I, the spirit. The spirit appears after 4 months. That's part of the process. You can't miss that link. Now let's imagine we have Ibrahim alayhi salam, the spirit exists. We want to bring him back. Now it has to go through the common cause and effect. From earth, it has to go until we have a human being called Ibrahim. But when it goes through the natural causes and effects, the law of nature, nothing changes. One of those steps is ensoulment. Now we have 2 spirits. So which one's going to be Ibrahim? This new spirit isn't going to be Ibrahim. Ibrahim's spirit already exists. You can't say this new spirit is that of Ibrahim. That's one problem. If you don't like this problem, you can say, well, no. We can say that the spirit of Ibrahim came from the embryo stage, and then it grew and grew and grew. And then at 4 months, the I arose. If we say that, and that's what reincarnationists say, that if someone dies, they come in the spirit of maybe another animal, another person, through delivery. The problem is that the spirit of Ibrahim already is actual, it exists. It would have to become potential again, there being no Ibrahim. And then becoming actual again, after becoming potential. If that happens, when it becomes actual again, after becoming potential, it can't be the same Ibrahim anymore. Do you know, when you build a sand castle, then you destroy it, then you build it again, it won't be the same anymore. You made the spirit of Ibrahim potential again. There's no Ibrahim anymore. That in itself is problematic, because the spirit is eternal after death. But you've made it now vegetative. You made it the spirit of an embryo. And then said it grew with time, and now we have a spirit of Ibrahim. It's the same Ibrahim. It can't be the same. It's impossible, philosophically. Or you can say, no, there's no need for the spirit of Ibrahim to come from stage 1 at the embryo stage. At 4 months, when the fetus is growing, at 4 months, then the spirit comes in this fetus. One of the problems with that is, again, the spirit of Ibrahim, you've made it potential again. By entering this new body, you've made it potential, and now it grows again and learns and new memories and so on and so forth. You're saying that is going to be the same Ibrahim? No, it can't be. Yes, I mean, sometimes in one person, they may suffer brain damage, and then they forget everything, and they would have to learn everything again. There, the spirit has been crippled because of that brain damage, but it's the same body. In reincarnation, the thing is, they enter a new body. That's the definition of reincarnation. However way you want to look at it, if you believe in all those prophets coming in a physical form, you have to explain this in a way that you don't fall into reincarnation. So Allama Tabu says, the second class of traditions that you're saying, we agree. But this seeing the physical prophets, we need more explanation. It's not a physical seeing. It's a vision. The Holy Prophet had a vision of all the prophets praying behind him. It was a tamathul. It wasn't in the physical realm. It was in the barzakhi realm. And then Ayatollah Jawadi Omri says, one is obliged in such cases to say that these were barzakhi apparitions, the saying of the prophets, appearing before the Holy Prophet. Now, apparitions, these visions, are of two types. One are ascending apparitions, and some are descending apparitions. Ascending apparitions, ascending visions are tantamount to tajassum al-a'mal, embodiment of one's actions. How our actions will be embodied in the succeeding realms of existence. That is, our actions will be embodied as apparitions, as semi-immaterial visions. These are ascending visions. Why are they ascending? Because we're in this realm, we are acting, and our actions here, when we go to a higher realm, not a physically higher realm, but we ascend, those actions are embodied. So, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. That's an example of ascending apparitions, because it's an example of embodiment of one's actions. Consuming orphans' property wrongfully, it will be embodied as consuming fire in the succeeding realm. These are apparitions of an ascending nature. But we also have apparitions, visions of a descending nature. That, an example of that is فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهَا بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا, like Lady Maryam had. Or revelation of the Quran is of this group. The Mirage is of this group too, where the Holy Prophet would ascend, receive divine knowledge, and then convert it to a lower semi-immaterial realm. These are descending visions now. Now, if one becomes a recipient to ascending visions, it will be painful, because it's tajassum al-a'mal, embodiment of your actions. If your actions were bad, you will burn. It's going to be painful. But if you were to see hell or any other vision through descending apparitions, it won't be painful, because it's not an embodiment of your actions. It's how your soul converted divine knowledge into semi-immaterial pictures. Actually, you'll benefit. Allah is giving you a message. The Mirage of the Holy Messenger was a descending tamathul. He ascended, acquired divine knowledge. Divine knowledge, Allah's knowledge, is infinite, eternal. And he had knowledge of everyone's heaven or hell status. Seeing people burning in hell, seeing people being blessed in heaven. But that was a descending apparition. Now, just to give a story from Ayatollah Hassanzadeh Amwali, he once had a vision of the descending type. I want to just go through this story here. He says in his memoirs, on the third night of the month of Sha'ban, 1409 after Hijrah, I was reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah in my house in Qom. He was reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah in a particular fashion to ascend and receive spirituality and so on and so forth. Although, if I just one marginal point here, sometimes the youth go for these certain du'as and adhkar and invocations and mantras. They want to find these special du'as as if there's some magic and abracadabra in Islam. You don't have to. Just go through the invocations that the Ahlul Bayt have given. That's safe. Because other than that, there are some invocations which are specific to certain spiritual states. They're prescribed for certain people. If you experience and if you practice them, it's going to be problematic. You're going to see things which you can't bear. Now this happened to someone in Iran. And since I know the person well, that's why I'm giving this story. Otherwise I usually don't like giving stories and everything. Because we don't know if it's true or not really. We can't base our aqa'id on stories. He went and found this zikr. And he wasn't prepared for it spiritually, and he kept on reciting it. All of a sudden, one day, he had a vision of hell. And he was being taken into hell by two angels. And he was horrified. And he kept on saying, Ya Kareem, Ya Rahim. And eventually the angels let him go, and he came back to his senses. And for 8 years, this man was ill. For 8 years, he couldn't communicate with anyone. He would break the windows, get the glass, and hit his head with the broken glass. Totally abnormal. Because he wasn't ready to see hell. It's not a joke. And he entered this adhkar, which he didn't know the effects of. He became so abnormal. He had a wife, a child. The wife had to divorce him. Had to get a divorce from him. Rightfully, because he was a danger, threat now. He wasn't normal. So the wife went and she took the child. For 8 years he was in the house. No one was safe from him. He would act very haphazardly and randomly. After 8 years, with Allah's help, going to different doctors, medication, he became normal. After 8 years, he just saw hell. That's it. He became normal, and it ended very happily. The wife then returned, and they married again. So it was a good ending. But the point is, one shouldn't go after these things. Only when there are traditions from the Ahlul Bayt which say, read this zikr, for example, 100 times in the morning, at night. Those things are safe. But the specialist parts, which are extrapolated with a certain science, that's not for me and you. Anyway, on the third night of the month of Sha'ban, 1409, I was reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah in my house in Qom. When I reached the verse, وَأَمَّا إِنْ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ الضَّالِّينَ, and if they are of the fabricators of truth, if they are of the astray ones, in Surah Al-Waqi'ah it's this. فَنُزُلٌ مِّنْ حَمِيمٍ, there'll be a share of boiling water for them. وَتَسْلِيَةُ جَهِيمٍ, entry into hell will happen for them. When Ayatollah came to this verse one night, after reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah for a number of nights, all of a sudden I realized that the apparition of hell before myself and the temperature of its flames was rising, and there I intuitionally, muhdara. Remember that verse? وَمَا عَمِلَتْ مِنْ خَيْرٍ muhdara. When they see their actions present before them, he saw hell present before him. It wasn't a physical reality. It was an intuitional knowledge, a huduri knowledge. Like in our dreams, for example. I suddenly saw and witnessed Allah's verse, and hell is brought into view for one who sees. وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمِ لِمَنْ يَرَى. Hell is brought into view for one who sees. I saw this for myself in reality. Without it, without hell, either making contact with me or harming me. Even though the apparition was realized deep within the perceiver's soul, that which he was seeing was a dimension of the soul, was a perception of the soul. Like when someone is dreaming, it's a product of the soul, it's a perception of the soul. But he was awake. But although he was perceiving hell, and if there was someone next to him, they wouldn't have seen hell, that hell did not burn him. It didn't affect him. He saw hell, he saw the rising temperatures, but it didn't bother him. Why? Because that hell wasn't a product of his actions. It was a product of his ascension, that descending. Oh, thank you very much, brother. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Allah. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. So he saw this hell, but it wasn't affecting him, without it either making contact with me or harming me. Okay. After all, apparitions are a form of perception. At that time, two matters became inspired upon me. This is Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh speaking. A mujtahid in Irfan. Yarhamakumullah. He says two matters were inspired upon me. Firstly, were man to purify himself, if man was to purify himself from material and spiritual contaminations, and to preserve one's muraqabah and sincerity, khulus, and to execute righteous actions, it will be possible for one to be the recipient of apparitions of whichever Quranic verse one recites, or whatever event, irrespective of whether or not the event has been realized or not. If you rise spiritually with all these, whichever verse of the Quran happens, you can see it. The story of Musa and the sea, you can see it happening before you. Things which have happened before, you can see it happening before you. Speaks of heaven and hell, you can see it happening before you, present before you, dimension of the soul. Or things which are to occur one day, you cannot see everything. It's a timeless realm. Secondly, the second matter, the apparitions that take place within the perceiver's soul is one thing, whilst their manifestation with the soul is quite another. So one is a manifestation, the embodiment of actions, the other is an apparition of the descending type. The former is not a cause of harm or distress for the perceiver. Apparitions of the descending type, where you ascend, then you convert that knowledge that you've acquired into pictures. That's not going to harm you. Rather, it leads to a joy-granting knowledge for one. Seeing heaven, seeing hell, seeing how people are there, and other verses of the Holy Quran is going to give you joy. The manifestation, however, that ascending type, which is a result of the tajassum al-a'mal, is a cause of harm and chastisement. Okay. So in the story of Lady Maryam, in chapter 19, verse 17, فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهُ بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا, that's an example of descending apparitions. She communicated with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she saw Archangel Gabriel with a certain message. Okay, now I think I have to skip one or two pages with your permission, otherwise it'll be too long. So in this Mirage, there's no problem to say that the Mirage was bodily. There's no problem in saying that. And there's no problem to say that it was bodily and it involved seeing things. But don't say it's a physical seeing, unless it's in the physical realm. But when it goes to seeing the prophets, yes, the prophets saw the bodies of the prophets. He saw the bodies in heaven and hell in the Miraj. But don't say that those bodies were physical. That's where people get confused sometimes. Because we're so absorbed in the physical realm, we interpret religion, everything in religion physically. There's no need for that. So when it comes to seeing the prophets and other things, these were all tamathulat, semi-immaterial, barzakhi visions. Now, there's one tradition, which I'll read very quickly. Someone asked Imam Baqir, how many years separated the Holy Prophet from Prophet Jesus? This was a question asked to Imam Baqir alayhi salam. Now, naturally the answer was around 500 years. But the reason the questioner asked this question was because then he said, so how do you explain the verse in chapter 43, verse 45, وَاسْأَلْ مَنْ أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ مِنَ الرُّسُولِ, where Allah says to the Holy Prophet, ask those who we have sent before you amongst the messengers. And the question is saying, when was the last prophet, Prophet Isa? How many years ago was that? So what does it mean the Prophet asks, Prophet Isa and those before, Man arsalna min qablika min rusulina, amongst the messengers. So it includes Prophet Ibrahim, Prophet Moses, Noah, and so on and so forth. Alayhim assalam. So the question is saying, the Quran says, ask those prophets. Now he's saying, when was the last prophet? How many years before the Holy Prophet was he? Then the questioner said, to which prophets must he ask this question when the last prophet existed 500 years ago? Then Imam Baqir alayhi salam recited chapter 17 verse 1, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan. He recited the verse and he said, because in the verse it says, لَنُرِيَهُ مِنْ آيَاتِنَا, so that we show the Prophet our signs. Imam Baqir alayhi salam said, one of the signs Allah showed the Prophet in Bayt al-Maqdis, that in Palestine, at Masjid al-Aqsa, was the resurrection of all preceding prophets. Gabriel was ordered to read the adhan and they all executed salat behind the Prophet. After salat ended, the Prophet turned towards them all and said, what do you bear testimony to? And all the prophets said, we believe that there is no deity but Almighty Allah, He has no partners, and that you are His messenger, and this is the allegiance we have given you. You see? Now, but does history record 124,000 prophets in an area of land praying behind the Holy Prophet? And then what does it mean, this resurrection of all the prophets? Does it have to be physical? There's no need to explain it as a physical resurrection. If you do, you're going to encounter problems. But there's no need to deny that there were bodily prophets and they did pray. But take it to a higher realm. لِنُرِيَهُ مِنْ آيَاتِنَا, to show our signs, the celestial signs. In the same way that Ibrahim was shown the celestial dominions of the heavens and earth. It was nothing physical. In the third class of Tabarsi, he said there are some things we can't take and accept the superficial meaning. Therefore we have to interpret it in another way. And that's those traditions of the Mirage where people are burning in hell right now. Where people are in heaven right now. Tabarsi, who says this, says we have to interpret this in another way. Those things that the Holy Prophet saw, people being hung upside down, people looking like pigs and so on and so forth, it was just to show what certain characteristics have these attributes to them. They shall be embodied like this, for example. Not that those people are burning in hell right now. Tabarsi was saying this. Allama Tabatabai is saying there's no need to discard the prima facie meaning of these traditions of Miraj. We can accept it. People are in hell or heaven right now. Those who consume the orphans' property wrongfully, إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. Right now they're ingesting fire in their bellies. It's happening right now. Hell is happening right now. Hell is a product of one's actions. And the Prophet is seeing it. There's no need to say it's not happening because the people are alive now, there's no heaven and hell. No. Heaven and hell, it's happening right now. It's not going to start later. And we can understand that from explicit verses of the Holy Quran. That was one of them. Another one, chapter 29, verse 54. وَإِنَّ جَهَنَّمَ لَمُحِيطَةٌ بِالْكَافِرِينَ. It's surrounding the kuffar right now. They're in hell. Right now, لَمُحِيطَةٌ. It's a present participle. It's right now it's happening. So there's no need in that third class to discard the superficial external meaning of those. No, it's correct. Right now, they're in hell as a result of their sins. And if they do good actions, right now they're in heaven, but they can't see it. That's the only thing. In any case, there's no need to reinterpret those classes of traditions of the Mirage.